Hello, sourdough mamas. I am Heather, and I wanted to mention real quick. I know you've heard me talk about Goldie, but her campaign is wrapping up. There's only a few days left, and they now have the quart size starter jar available. So if you're watching on YouTube, I'm showing that right now. It has a rubber band, which is actually going to come in the color gold. So this is just a prototype, but this is the size. I can't have the pint one out here to show you because I'm using it right now. It's dirty. So here's the quart jar. It's super cool. It's got a great lid and it fits nicely, but it lets the gases escape as well. So it's available now as an add-on to any pledge to Goldie's campaign. And there's also a new bundle option that includes Goldie, the puck, the pint jar, and the quart jar. So if you've already pledged, you can choose the quart jar as an add-on. And if you haven't, it's a great time to invest in Goldie while her price is still well below the MSRP. So head on over to leavenly.com/Goldie and you can get more information on that, on the amazing starter warmer, and also on the packages that they have. So you can get that quart jar that way. So today in the episode, in the podcast, we're going to be talking about the Sourdough Success Path. First, I just wanted to mention that this almost didn't happen. I almost wasn't able to record this episode. I had to leave earlier to pick up my son. He's 19 months old and his daycare called and said that he was throwing up at school. So I obviously had to go pick him up and no big deal. I was thinking, well, when he goes down to nap, I'll record my podcast and it'll be fine. But he napped for about 20 minutes and I was getting prepared and then he woke up and of course he threw up in the bed. So sorry if you have a light stomach. Moms can talk about this stuff all day long. But I went in, got him all changed, and then he wouldn't lay down again. So then, instead of getting ready for the podcast and actually, brushing my hair, doing something with my appearance, if you're watching on YouTube, you can see that I look a little haggard. Instead, I gave that time to my baby. So we were snuggling in his room. He was lying on me in the glider, and it was really sweet. Then my husband came in to check on us, and he jumped down and went running out to the living room. So my husband's got him now, so I had a chance to start to record. So I thought I would take it. You might hear him banging on the door or carrying on in other such ways. But yeah, so that's what's going on. Also, you might notice that I'm sporting a super cool hoodie. If you're listening, it's bright pink. It has a circle on the front and it says Sourdough Mamas. And also, I'm going to take an obnoxiously large drink of this cup of tea. Wow, isn't that a nice mug? So stay tuned for that. There's some exciting announcements coming with Sourdough Mamas merchandise. So let's talk Sourdough Success Path. So my story kind of lines up with a lot of your stories, how I got into sourdough. And I started the community based on that, because at the time I was wishing that there was something like this for when I was starting out, and there wasn't, and I wish there was, so then I made it. And I hope that it's been really helpful to all of you who have joined and found support. And people in their sourdough journey, excuse me, are entering at all sorts of different levels. So you might have somebody entering as a beginner baker, or they might have a little bit of more experience than the average beginner and be making more advanced loaves. So my thing was looking at it like, how can we help new bakers move from level to level? And how can we kind of distinguish the levels of sourdough baking? And I never wanted it to seem like, oh, you're only at level 1 and you should be at level 5 and you have to do all this stuff to get to level 5. It was never about that. It was more about you could pinpoint exactly where you are on this map, and then you can look to see which steps you can take to advance your experience, advance your practice, and maybe move to the next level if that's what you want to do. So if they're aiming for that, that's awesome. That's what it's designed for. And it's designed with your success in mind. And so by following along with the Sourdough Success Path, you'll be able to see tangible changes, increases, and general improvements to your sourdough baking. So I have it right here in front of me. I'm going to hold it up in case you're watching, but basically it looks like a swirly map with 5 stages, and we're going to break those down and talk about what they are. And then also head on over to leavenly.com/podcast. This is episode number 14, and you can get this download in the show notes there. So I have 3 young kids, and I remember when I only had 3 dogs. I had 13, 14-year-old chocolate lab, and then a 5-year-old pit mix and a chocolate lab puppy. And that puppy is now 6, which I can't even believe. But I remember wishing for guidance on, what to do next or what else to try. And when I started out on my journey, I found Chad Robertson's tartine bread, as a lot of us did. And that was really the only guidance I had. And his writing, his pictures, his guidance was really, really helpful. But there was nothing like this available. And I kind of had wished, I was wishing that there was. I was thinking, like, what should I try next? Should I try playing with rye, or is that too far advanced for me? Am I going to run into problems? Should I play with adding some cheese and herbs to my bread, or what's going to happen? Is that too far in advance? So that's kind of the premise of designing the Sourdough Success Path. And I designed it for you guys to be able to pinpoint where you are in your journey and to get better success. So let's break down the Sourdough Success Path real quick. So there are 5 different stages in the success path. So for example, John might enter at level 4, which he is an advanced baker. And there are some steps in that stage, which we're going to talk about in a second, that he can meet to move on to stage 5. Whereas Sarah, a beginner baker, might enter at stage 1, and she's just kind of investigating, she's learning everything, she's preparing, and she's gathering all her tools, but she hasn't even started having a starter yet. So we're going to walk through all those stages in just a minute. But each stage also is broken down into milestones. And so the milestones are basically supplemental, they're supplemented with action items, which we're going to talk about in a few minutes. So it kind of goes like this, like from the top down, it goes your stage, and then your milestones, and then your action items. So the action items are going to help you achieve the milestones in each stage. And then once you complete all the milestones in each stage, you move on to the next stage, with the goal of reaching whichever stage you want to reach. So we'll talk about all the stages in just a few minutes. I'm going to break them down, and you can go on and download the success path and take a look at where you might be, or you can just listen to my description as you're driving in your car and figure out where you fall on the sourdough success path. And so basically, you could decide what stage you're at now, and then you can also read ahead or listen ahead and decide what stage you'd like to be at someday. So it might not be stage 5. You might not ever want to reach stage 5, and that is totally okay. It's really about your journey and your path. Hence why I called it the Sourdough Success Path. You might wish to only reach stage 3, and that's completely okay. What's important is that it works for you. So that's the most important thing to remember. So follow along with me as I describe each stage, and then try to determine where you are and where you'd like to end up. All right, so I'm going to read from my notes here so I don't mess anything up. So stage 1 in the Sourdough Success Path is called preparing. And in the preparing stage, you haven't baked yet. You don't even have a starter yet, but you know that you're interested and you're gathering information. So welcome to the addiction. And your action items in stage 1 are all about learning, learning, learning. So you might have found this podcast because you are really interested in baking sourdough and you haven't even started yet. So congratulations, first of all. And I am here to help you, and the Sourdough Success Path is here to help you as well. Stage 2 is called starting, and it revolves all around your sourdough starter. Very clever, right? See what I did there? So do you have one? Do you know how to make one? Do you know how to feed one? The action items in stage 2 are starter focused to help you move up to stage 3. So it's all about your sourdough starter in stage 2. So if you're listening and you're like, oh, I have a sourdough starter and I pretty much understand how it works and how it functions, you probably fall somewhere between stage 2 and stage 3. So you'll want to take a look at the milestones with that, which we're going to talk about in a couple minutes. Stage 3 is practicing. And this is where the baking begins. I think this is the point where a lot of sourdough mamas join the group. This is where a lot of beginner bakers join me on the podcast, maybe reach out and email me because they're just starting out. So stage 3 is called practicing, and this is where the baking begins. And in this stage, you'll build a leaven. You're going to do a float test, and you're going to bake your first loaves and more. And your action items revolve around absorbing knowledge and practicing. So getting experience, getting your hands in the dough, getting your eyes on the dough, and learning about your sourdough and what it's doing and how it should be acting. So that's stage 3. Stage 4 is all about perfecting. So this means that you're able to get consistent results with your sourdough, but you're working on making small adjustments to make it perfect for you. So your action items in this stage are all about customizing the sourdough process to make it work for you. So you might be getting great bread results with a basic mix of flours, but you might want to try something with rye, for example. You might want to try something with inclusions, something like that. And so that's a mix of stage 4 and 5. But again, the milestones are going to help to clarify these stages a little bit. Stage 5 is called mastering. And that is the final stage of the sourdough success path. And so in mastering, you'll be playing with inclusions. You'll be attempting 100% whole wheat loaf. You will be learning how to use your starter to bake other kinds of breads and a lot more. But you're also not done here at stage 5. Okay, so even if you check off every milestone, the learning never ever ends. So you're going to continue to improve your baking, and you're going to challenge yourself in the process. So now we've covered all the stages. Hopefully you've kind of identified where you fall on the sourdough success path, which stage you might be in, and also which stage you might want to find yourself in. So stage 4, you would be getting great results every time with your basic sourdough recipe that everybody in the whole world loves. Like, who doesn't love sourdough bread? And you might not want to play with inclusions. You might not want to play with a whole wheat loaf, and that's okay. That can be your goal. Or maybe you're in stage 4 and you want to move to stage 5. So figure those two things out. And now let's talk about milestones. So the milestones are tasks that you should accomplish before moving on to the next stage. So I'm going to hold this up for those of you who are watching on YouTube, and they vary from stage to stage. So depending on what stage you're in, that's what the milestones are going to look like. So you're going to see that there's kind of like bulleted points underneath each stage with the milestones in it. Kind of hard to explain over the podcast, but if you're looking at it, you'll understand. So the milestones, they are basically like questions, and they act like a checklist. So here's an example. I'm going to pick this up, and I'm going to read from stage 2. So stage 2 is starting. Again, it's all about your sourdough starter. So here are the milestones that you're going to want to reach before you move on to stage 3. Do you have a starter that consistently rises and falls? Yes or no? Has your starter passed the float test? Yes or no? Do you have a sustainable long-term feed schedule that works with your life and your schedule? Yes or no? And have you dried your sourdough starter, as a backup in case there's an emergency? Yes or no? So if the answer to all of those is yes, then you move on to 3, which is stage 3, which is practicing. So then you would check out the milestones on stage 3. So if one of those is a no, like for example, if you haven't dried your sourdough starter yet, then you're still in stage 2. And you need to basically check that off before you can move on to the stage 3 milestones. So that's an example of what the milestones are. And this would have been really helpful for me when I was starting out, because like I said, sometimes your brain is all over the map and you're looking at, really great loaves on Instagram and you're like, oh, I really want to do that. But it's all about building on your knowledge, on your foundational knowledge, like one layer at a time. So of course you can jump ahead and bake 100% whole wheat loaf, when you're in stage 3. Of course you can do that, but you might not have the knowledge and the experience to draw on to be able to do that successfully the first or second time. It might take a couple of tries. So that is kind of the basis of why I created the Sourdough Success Path. And so let's talk real quick about the action items in the Sourdough Success Path. So here's what they're going to look like. Again, they're divided up into 5 stages. And the action items are like resources that you can click on and follow and get resources online. So in the preparing stage, for example, in number 1, there's an action item that's called check out our comprehensive guide, how to make sourdough bread, right? Because in the preparing stage, you are just gathering information. You're getting all the information you can. You're soaking it up like a sponge. You're learning all kinds of techniques and you're not applying them yet. So another action item in preparing stage is learn about important kitchen tools in the sourdough beginner's kit. And so again, that's a link, and you click on that link and it takes you to the sourdough beginner's kit, and you can access that. And that's where you're going to get the help you need to move on to the next stage. And so the action items are the tangible resources that are going to help you achieve your milestones in the Sourdough Success Path. So they look like all kinds of things. They look like printable guides. They look like online recipes. They look like sourdough articles. They look like blog posts or maybe YouTube videos. So you're going to use these resources to take your baking to the next level. And I've seen a lot of posts on the Sourdough Mamas group about people talking about which level they're in, which stage they're in the Sourdough Success Path, where they want to be, and they've looked through it and they're accessing these action items. And so they have a great sense of control over their sourdough journey. And again, obviously, this is completely optional, right? This is not something you have to do in order to master sourdough or to even make good sourdough for you and your family. I think that's one thing that I always harp on, is that the best sourdough bread is the bread that you think is the best sourdough bread. So for example, my crumb might not be what you think is a good crumb, and that's not what you would want to bake, but that's what I love and that's what I aim for. So our ideas of an ideal sourdough loaf are going to look different. And other little subtle nuances, like how long it takes, or how long we bulk ferment, or how many loaves we end up making, things like that, different ingredients we add. It's all going to be a preference thing. And so you can look at the Sourdough Success Path and you can completely customize it to your own journey, which is my favorite thing about this Sourdough Success Path. It's not like, here's how you should be doing it, like step 1, step 2, step 3. It is a checklist and it is a guide, but it's not that you have to achieve this certain level of perfection. It's building your experience, it's learning with your hands, it's learning with your eyes, and getting in that knowledge before you move on. So is it completely necessary? Absolutely not. But it's something I created for the Sourdough Moms community. And so I wanted to talk about it this week on the podcast. I know this is a short podcast because I have this crazy life with this poor sick baby at home. And literally I have some throw up on my sweater right here. I don't know if you can see that. But that's mom life and it's busy. But I'm also really dedicated to you guys, to the Sourdough Mamas, to the podcast. And I didn't want to leave you hanging this week. So I had planned on doing an episode on the Sourdough Success Path. And so that's why I made it this week, because it's quick, it's to the point. And if you have any questions, reach out to me, heather@leavenly.com, regarding the Sourdough Success Path. And again, you can find the Sourdough Success Path and all of these resources in the show notes of this episode. So you can either head to leavenly.com/podcast, which is really easy to remember, or you can head to leavenly.com/episode-14, and that'll take you exactly to this episode's show notes. You can download it there. It's also accessible in the Sourdough Mamas Facebook group. So if you're already in Sourdough Mamas, just head up to, I believe it's called Guides. Let me pull it up real quick so I don't give you bad information. But there's a section on the top of Sourdough Mamas. Oh yeah, it's called Guides. So you click on Guides and you'll see in there's the new member challenge, which you all should do when you join the group. And there's also the Sourdough Success Path. There's an overview and there's also the PDF download. So again, it's completely free. You can go and download that now or whenever you feel like you want to hop on Sourdough Success Path, and you can just keep it in the back of your mind. Like right now I'm in stage 3, maybe in a month I'll check back and see where I am. Or you could follow along, check off the milestones, and treat it like a checklist, because who doesn't love a good checklist? So that is it for me for this week, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in. I really appreciate it. Kudos to all you busy mamas out there too, who are dealing with the same kind of crap that I'm dealing with day in and day out. I call it crap, but I really love it. I love these kids so much. So, but it's busy. It's busy. So with that, I hope you guys have a really great week baking, and I will see you here next week.